Welcome to the Soulful Connections podcast, co-hosted by Laura Brown and Natalie Parsons. Soulful Connections podcast is a sacred space sharing intentional conversations that serve as medicine, supporting our spiritual path, wild alignment, embodiment, transformation, and healing. Let's dive into our hearts, our truth. Thank you so much, and welcome to the Soulful Connections podcast, conversations that serve as medicine. I am one half of the podcast, co-host Natalie Parsons, and today with me I have a very exciting guest. I've been looking forward to this conversation for quite some time. And so joining me today is Sephora Garrison Miller, a licensed psychotherapist, a certified yoga therapist, 500-hour therapeutic yoga teacher, and she's passionate about mental health, advocate, and specializes in treating complex trauma, attachment trauma, religious trauma in adults, as well as family-based interventions for teens who struggle with suicidally, did I say that right?
Suicidal, yeah.
Suicidal, yeah. Depression and self-harming behavior, and their parents who may also be survivors of childhood trauma. And so, welcome. The first thing I would like to discuss, which actually came up in our initial contact with each other, is your beautiful name. I think this is a great opportunity, actually, because of all the conversations around cultural appropriation. It's very interesting when we see a name that is different than what we're used to, maybe from a different culture. We're not sure how to say it or pronounce it. I had to practice it a few times. I asked a few times just to make sure I said it right. And it's interesting because that was the first question I reached out to you with we were doing voice memos in the Facebook Messenger, was how do I say your name? And your response was so beautiful because you were surprised, and because the normal reaction, the typical reaction, I should say, is that most people ask to call you something else.
Yeah, that is spot on. That's a spot on observation right there. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so I would just like to open up the conversation with inviting you to maybe share a little bit about those experiences and, how we can really approach these situations when we encounter folks with these perhaps titles or names that we really don't know how to pronounce.
Well, I think your approach was perfect, right? Was just asking, how do I say your name? That to me is the most obvious thing to do, right? My name is Hebrew, right? So Tzipora is a Hebrew word, and in Hebrew, the meaning is a little bird, right? Tzipora was my great grandmother. In the Jewish tradition and culture, it's really common that we name our children after ancestors who have crossed over into the other realm. And also Tzipora, for those of you familiar with the Old Testament, she was the wife of Moses in the Old Testament. So there's a couple of layers there, right, to my name. And growing up, you're absolutely right. Upon meeting new people, generally within the first couple of minutes, they would attempt to say my name several times and then just get frustrated and say, "Is there something else I can call you?" When I was a child in elementary school, I always remember on the first day of school when the teacher would be doing the roll call, when the teacher would pause and kind of, I knew it was me, right? And I would always just raise my hand and say, "Tsipora Gerson here." So it kind of became almost a joke, right, among my classmates, is that, the teacher was always going to butcher my name. So yes, I mean, I kind of have grown up with this idea of my name is hard. People oftentimes struggle to pronounce it, and very few people actually make any attempts at saying it correctly, right?
Mhm.
And so it's really for a person who does have a name that's different or is ethnic or is of another language, to have somebody just say, "I'm sorry, could you pronounce my name for you because I really want to say your name correctly?" That's really an honor. I mean, it really honors, the person who has the ethnic name. Um, it's not a time to ask for, is there a shortened version of your name? Is there a nickname I can call you? Can I make up some funny name to call you? And the answer to all of that is no, right? This is my name. It has a meaning. There really isn't any way to shorten it. So it's going to be on you to kind of stumble and maybe make a mistake, and that's
Yeah.
okay, right? My
Yeah.
expectation is that you don't say it perfectly. Um, my name has 9 letters. If a
Yeah.
4-year-old can learn to write 9 letters, and just like, you can do it too, right? So the same thing happens with my daughter. Her name is Eli Sheva, which is also
Oh,
Hebrew.
yeah.
And people are constantly asking to shorten it. They don't say it right. She repeats it back, you know. She says Elisheva. They say Elisheva. No, Elisheva. Elishava. No, Elisheva. Ali Shiva. Elisheba. No, Elisheva, right? Like,
Mhm.
and so she gets quite frustrated at it too. And she'll say, "Oh, just call me Ellie. Don't worry about it."
Mhm.
So she gets quite frustrated as well.
Yeah.
So yes, it is. It's an interesting conversation to have because, quite honestly, I don't know as if I've ever really had this kind of conversation, because it's something that's just become so, it's like so normal that people don't know how to pronounce my name.
And I think it's a
So
really important conversation.
mhm,
I'm excited about this opportunity to insert this into our conversation,
mhm,
um,
mhm.
because a lot of people don't recognize the harm it can cause, because it's almost like dehumanizing, as if you feel less important when someone isn't taking the care to really honor your name and your namesake. And I think, um, to have patience, like I love how like you are open and having patience to continuing to correct others. But I think I always say in these situations with the person, please, remind me if I make a mistake. I want you to continuously correct me. So say if a couple months go by and I haven't said your name in a while and it hasn't quite stuck in the brain, I welcome the correction because I truly want to honor it and get it correct and say it correctly. And I feel that this is really important. And I can relate a little bit to the journey. Um, I'm French actually, and I grew up in an English community. So it's not apparent in my married name now, but my God, teachers and everyone butchered my French name for so many years, and it was so frustrating. So I think that's what started that sensitivity and awareness when I encountered people with a different name from a different culture or a different language.
Yeah, yeah.
So
Yeah,
I'm
and it's
grateful.
really it's a yeah, I mean, and it's really, if you think about it, it's really a small gesture, right? Like, I'm not asking you to go so out of your way here and so out of your comfort zone. I'm not saying you have to go take Hebrew lessons, go to a Hebrew immersion school and learn how to speak Hebrew,
Hmm.
but it's just a small gesture, right? To, I think, avoid doing what a lot of folks do, which is it's erasure, right? It's kind
Yeah.
of an erasure culture. And the
Yeah.
expectation is that here in the United States, you assimilate, right, to
Hmm.
the dominant status quo.
Mm.
I know for years I would sit and allow people to mispronounce my name in meetings and groups and clubs and classes and workplace conferences and meetings. And I would just allow them to say my name incorrectly because I was afraid to speak up because I didn't want to offend them or make them feel bad. It's kind of that I'm a people pleaser in recovery, as I always say. I'm a codependent in recovery. And so um my feelings of self-worth were almost always entangled in and dependent upon what others thought about me. So I didn't want to ruffle feathers, I didn't want to offend, so I would just sit there and just allow it to happen. um yeah, so and that takes some undoing and healing right there,
Yeah. And I was
to
honestly so excited because I wasn't aware that it was Hebrew. So I was
mhm.
excited to learn that for one. And then the meaning behind it, I was just so inspired to hear all of that. And I think without asking that question, I would have never received all that beautiful information and history about the essence of your name. And so that just opened opened it up to really a deeper understanding of you as well. And it was an incredible insight. So yeah, thank you so much for that, because that just completely lights up my world. Hearing the
Thank you for
history.
asking.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you for asking.
Mm.
It's much appreciated.
And
Definitely.
so
Yeah. It's not every day. It's not every day. People are that curious, and
mhm,
it's not every day. So I would say, when you asked me, I was really, in a way, it caught me off guard at first, initially, because I thought, wow, it's so rare that I'm actually asked this, right? So it's interesting because I work right now. One of the roles that I have, I work at a community mental health clinic, which is in a Jewish organization. So I work for Jewish and Family and Career Services of Atlanta. That's one of the roles that I have. And it's interesting when you work in a place where the majority of the people are just like you or share the same cultural traditional background. And so people hear my name and it's like, oh, it's just a, like, Jennifer would be, or
yeah.
Jessica. I mean, it's just like such a common. People don't. It's very. People are like, oh, it's Sephora. Of course, that was my grandmother's name, or that's my Hebrew name, or that's my
Mhm.
daughter's middle name. So there's just a familiarity. It's
Mm.
very different. Yeah.
Yeah. And where I'm at on this part of the planet, I think so. Me and my husband actually sat down and looked at the statistics of our area and the population within each religious sector. And I believe, if I'm recalling correctly, it was under 2,000 persons that were
Hmm.
Jewish within our
Hmm.
province. And I'm like, wow, that's not
Yeah.
very much
Yeah.
at all. So no wonder.
Yeah.
I don't
Hmm.
know personally in my area
Yeah.
anyone within that culture or religion. It's
Yeah.
it's so it's so no wonder it was I had no idea. So that's why I was so
Yeah.
excited because it was
Yeah.
very
Yeah.
different for me.
Hmm.
It's not, what
Right.
I'm used to in my area.
Right, right. Yeah. And the more, the more rural it is, the less of a Jewish population there's going to be, I think,
Gotcha.
typically. And the more urban,
Yeah.
these big city centers, there's going to be much more of a Jewish population. But really, I think statistically, Jews make up about 1% of the entire world's population. So
Interesting.
there aren't, yeah, there is not, it's, yeah, there's not a whole lot of us. There's a lot of us, but
Hmm.
not a whole lot of us.
And more so
Yeah.
in the US than Canada, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I'd have to, I mean, I don't know off the top of my head, but I grew up in New York and now I live
Hmm.
in Atlanta. Both are huge Jewish populations. And so, but I can remember, back in my 20s when I did a lot of traveling and working abroad, um, I would be in some of these European cities that at one point in time had probably a thriving Jewish community, but because of certain historical events, those populations were largely wiped out. And so, finding a synagogue to go to, in Germany, or in the middle of kind of rural Germany, is really hard. And so, but then again, being able to, when I did find a synagogue, being able to go and participate, and even though, um, my German is by far from, it's not perfect. It's good, but it's not perfect. But just being able to sit in and listen and know and follow along, because the service is in Hebrew. So it's, yeah, yeah. Culturally, it's yeah. You can go anywhere in the world to a synagogue and probably be able to follow along somehow, right?
Mhm.
Yeah, that's one of the nice things about it.
Nice, nice. So I'd love
Yeah.
to dive into a little bit more about your work. It is from the
Yeah, sure.
moment, yeah, from the moment I um found you. I think it
Mhm,
was through
mhm.
Aaron. Um,
Yeah, it was through Aaron. Mhm.
yeah, it was through Aaron, Modern Mystic Sky, and started following your work on Instagram and reading more about it. I was just blown away by the intricacy of how you weave through the components through like being in the psychology field and the spirituality and merging the social justice and all of these and trauma, which I'm also involved in um, the mental health field in my area within trauma. But the way you've woven all of that together in this beautiful presentation that makes sense. And it's just like this beautiful tapestry of support that creates an incredible strong foundation and an openness that really is welcoming for everyone, no matter where you are in your path, no matter what your beliefs are. It's truly all encompassing and welcoming for all. So my curiosity is, how in the world did you get into, I'm sure it's a little complex, but where along your journey, how did you begin to weave these elements together?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's definitely, it's an evolving work in progress and
Yeah.
process. I am a lifelong student, right? As my field expects us to be actively
Yes.
engaged in learning. We have to fulfill continuing education requirements every 2 years. So the encouragement and the ask is that you're constantly learning.
Yes.
Um, and because we have to constantly be able to respond to the needs of the community, of who's in front of us, and we know that the human condition is quite fluid. And so, I mean, my journey is somewhat complex, right? There are a lot of twists and turns, and times where I changed course altogether, times where I circled back to the beginning where I started. I mean, so it is a pretty um layered journey. But I can say that I started off actually working in the field. I've danced since I was 3 years old. So my
Mm.
mother put me in dance when I was three, because back in the 80s, doctors treated hyperactivity with movement and physical, and not medication like it's
Mhm.
so common today. But dance just became this thing. It became an anchor for me. So I'd always been involved in this, in some kind of practice of embodiment. I danced and I worked professionally as a dancer for many years, until my body just really couldn't withstand the daily stressors of that. And then I found my way to the yoga mat. And you as a fellow yogi know that many people find their way to yoga from a place of feeling really broken and damaged, and in a place of suffering. That's what brings a lot of people into yoga, whether it's physical injury, mental injury. For me, it was a lot of mental and emotional injury.
Mm.
So, I started practicing yoga, which became a movement practice for me that was more conducive just to the condition of my body was in, being 30 plus years, it wears on the body,
Yeah.
and so, I had one experience while I was living in Israel. And a very good friend of mine committed suicide while I was living there. It was
Mm.
extremely traumatic situation. And I don't want to go a whole lot into that, but I can tell you it was, being there on the scene, witnessing something like that is kind of an image that you can't get out of your head ever,
Yeah.
right? Hence,
Yeah.
what most people with PTSD can relate to that, what it's like to have something kind of going through your mind, in a loop. And
Yes.
so I just, I wanted to continue to use my practice of movement, my practice of embodiment, um, in a way that could be of service to others,
Mm.
right? So I started, in Israel, I started shadowing an art therapist in the hospital just to see what she was doing. I started to just eh, kind of insert myself as like an apprentice, or like a mentor. I was always
Yeah.
searching for mentors in the field. Um, and when I got back to the States, I had a mentor say, you just if you get a degree, a master's degree in social work, you can do pretty much whatever you want in the field of psychotherapy and mental health. Um, and so at that point, I followed her advice and I got my
Mm.
MSW. And I found that at that point, my graduate degree was kind of my ticket. Like,
Yeah.
it got me in the door in a lot of places. And so when I would get in, I was able to say, okay, well, I have all of this background in dance and movement and yoga, and can I offer groups, to the folks here? Or can I work one-on-one this way? And most everybody's answer was always, of course. They're always looking for diverse offerings and interventions. Um, so it really just kind of blossomed out of that.
Mm.
I went through a lot of years. I don't want to say wasted time, because I don't think in hindsight any of it was a waste. I think it's all part of the process, but a lot of time fixating on what I thought I was supposed to be doing, or how I thought I should be showing up, or what all of these experts, and I say with air quotes, experts, self-proclaimed experts in the field,
Yeah.
said, well, this is how your website needs to look, or this is how your office needs to look, or this is how your resume needs to look. So I spent a lot, and I say wasted time again, um, following the advice of people that in hindsight, I'm not so sure are as smart as they think they are, right? So there really isn't, I think it wasn't, my liberation really came at the point where I said, you know what? I'm so tired of following all of these rules that everybody is saying I have to follow. And I think that happened when I turned about 40.
Mm.
And my own therapist at the time, I showed up in her office and I said, you know what? I don't know why, am I allowed to use bad words
Oh
while
yeah,
we're
yeah,
talking,
yeah.
or is this
Use any word you want
okay?
to. Everything
Okay.
goes.
I turned 40 and I said to the therapist, I said, I just don't know why I want to tell everybody to go fuck themselves. Like, I want to tell everybody to go fuck off and go fuck themselves.
Yeah.
And she's like, my dear, welcome to the 40s, right? It's like a rite of passage that every woman goes through. It's like, you're just tired of playing the games. And so
Yeah.
it wasn't until I gave myself permission to show up how I want to show up, how I saw that, you know what, I can use my art, I can use my yoga, I can use all my
Yes.
clinical knowledge and expertise, and I can create, as you said, this kind of tapestry where all people feel welcome,
Mm.
where although I'm not trying to be everything for everyone,
No.
the people that resonate with what I'm putting out there will show up, right? Like, I know I know I'm not everybody's cup of tea, and I
Mhm.
know I can't help anybody and everybody. And I have had many clients where after one or two sessions, it's like, this is not what I'm looking for. Okay, that is totally fine. I don't take
Absolutely.
it personally. I'm not living in a scarcity sort of place in my mind where I'm gonna get on my knees and beg you to stay, like, on my caseload. If you feel like you would be better served elsewhere, like, that's okay. Um, and so I really think it wasn't until then that I really started to feel empowered
Mm.
in my own practice and my own knowledge, my own skills, and could be really intentional and skillful in the way I wove them in, and the way I really am, seeing who's in front of me, and, using kind of, in yoga therapy, we use kind of an elemental theory, right? We're looking at the elements, right? And how we would assess somebody. Um, and it's really, for me, at the end of the day, it's about the relationships that we cultivate with our clients that are the most important, the most sustainable. Like, that's what helps the change happen. Um, and so I think that, I think because it's okay to be creative as a
Mhm.
helping professional, right? I think that there's a lot of beliefs out there that you have to look a certain way, you have to fit
Yeah.
into a certain kind of mold. If you and I were just to Google, like, Google images of therapists, right? You're going to see
Yeah.
people like in a business suit with a clipboard, and then like a very troubled person sitting there, like, with their hand in there. Like,
Yes.
that's what we see, right? And that's what gets
Yeah.
normalized because that's what we're exposed to. But um you can bring your authentic self into
Mhm.
this work. And I
Yeah.
think we really have to give ourselves permission to do that. For the longest time, I'm a woman with white skin. I have dreadlocks. I have a nose ring, right? Like, that's how I show up in my therapy space. Um, and and I think when I'm working with young people, it's a strength. It really helps to build that rapport, right? Because you get a teenager in the room, and teenagers are not known to be really happy to be in your therapy space, right? Especially if
Yeah.
their parents have, like, been dragging them. But they see me and they're like, oh, okay, I think this could maybe work, because I'm not
Yeah.
sitting there in the business suit and the clipboard, and so I think, and I really hope that answered your question. I know that was a
It
very
does.
long there, but
It
I
truly
think,
does.
we have to give ourselves permission to be authentic, and to show up in a way that is aligned, right, with who
Mhm.
we really, really are. Um, and that is okay, right?
Mhm.
You know, um, yeah. And I
It
think that's when I really started to, get feedback from people like, wow, I really like your artwork, and, I really like, and, that's how I want to express myself in these, community spaces of social media.
yeah.
I'm I'm not just going to throw up like some generic, you know, generic picture from, you know, some generic source of photographs. Like, no, I'm going to sit down. I'm going to take the time to like really create something that expresses who I really am.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And there is so much. And I think for anyone listening, you really offered an incredible message through your story. No matter what field you're in, what it is you're offering, connecting to your authentic expression is ultimately the most important. I can really relate to the therapist with the, suit jacket. I initially started going to therapy as a teenager. I actually went through traumatic events and then I was in the system and, in group therapy and individual therapy to help with trauma and PTSD and all that fun. And and I was offered the therapist with the suit jacket and the professional look. And I remember, I'll never forget, I was 16 years old when I initially started, and I'm sitting in her office and I was like, oh my God, I did not want to open up at all. Like, it was like looking at that suit jacket for me closed the doors, because it's just seeing that was so intimidating. It felt as if there was judgment. Now, to others, it could be calming and relaxing and what they need. But for myself, I needed someone like you. I needed, and eventually, I did find that, because I did ask for another social worker to be assigned to. I did take that action. I'm like, I hate this woman over here. Like, and I did speak up. And so the services offered me another social worker, another therapist. And even though she was dressed pretty professionally, when I went in, what really helped break down the barriers is on her desk, she actually had a statue of an angel. She had some crystals and she had a singing bowl. And I was deeply spiritual even as a teenager. And I was like, aha, I think this is the one. And so those little things of expressing her nature and herself just invited me into feeling safe, because she was authentically who she was and not wearing a mask of someone who she thought she was supposed to be. That in itself creates safe space. And when we wear these masks, so if the blazer is your authentic self, it is a safe place. But if it's not, and you're putting it on for the sake of, I think this is the way I'm supposed to be, it's not supporting that safe space,
Right. Yeah, I absolutely agree. And I don't think that, and I'm certainly not saying that it's a bad thing. If that's what you like to wear and that's what you're comfortable in, by all means go for it. But I have worked at places, that have had really strict dress codes, and it's more about that corporate look versus honestly, I've worked at places before that have been more focused on the corporate look of the employees versus the skill set of the employees. And that, I think, is quite dangerous, especially in in a field where you have a lot of vulnerable people coming to you. Right. And the focus of the leadership is more on how they look versus the quality and the skill of your employees, because you might miss, right, some people who are not that qualified kind of getting in just because they look a certain way. So
Absolutely.
Absolutely. So it became like a deal breaker for me, because I feel like when, you're interviewing for a job, it's like, I'm also interviewing you, don't forget, I'm also interviewing you to see if you're going to be a good fit for me. And, again, I'm just at a point in my career where I feel like it's what you see is what you get. And, you know, if this is going to work, it will. And if it's not, it won't. And that, again, like, it's okay.
Yeah.
It's okay. We're not everybody's cup of tea. We can't be everything for everyone all the time.
Yeah. And I love how you mentioned the honoring of, if a client is not right for you and not right fit for you, it's okay. And I think that goes within every industry, every field. It's so important to remind ourselves of that. And that's why, I'm not sure if you do this, but I often I like having a nice broad network of other people
Yes.
within the field
Yeah.
with a variety of skills and a variety of approaches who may be very, very different than me. But when I encounter that client that comes into my orbit, I'm like, oh, actually, I think you're going to be much better suited for this person. It's such an asset and such a strength to be able to do that, because that is incredibly supportive to recognize, whether they're recognizing it or you're recognizing it, that it's not quite a good match. Because I truly believe that it's important for us to find that match in our practitioner, in our healer, in our therapist, whatever it may be, to be really mindful, even if they could be amazing at their field, but if you're not feeling that connection, then it might not be, wise to move forward and find that human that really fits you.
Yeah. No, I definitely agree. And I also think that it can be ethically harmful, right? When you
Yes.
continue to work with somebody who is not a good fit, or you're being triggered by, and you can't stay fully present in the
Yes.
space with that person because the nature of their story, or the trauma they've been through is too triggering for you, you know, unless you're really able to stay present and you're recognizing that, and you're doing some really good internal tracking, kind of one eye in, one eye out. If we're not aware, right, those implicit biases, those unconscious biases can really affect the way we act and behave, which can, inadvertently do a lot of harm or continue to do harm to somebody. And so it's just important to be, that's why the name of the game, I think, in this field is self-awareness and reflexivity, and being able to reflect and have your own, and be engaged in your own process and your own work, right? It's not only healthy for you, but it's healthy for your clients, and it helps us to be sustainable and not burn out, right? So having those boundaries and knowing when to just fold, knowing when to fold your cards and say, look, I can't do this, or this is not, I'm not going to be able to serve you in the long run. I think you would be better served by this other person, you
Yeah.
know. And to really, frame that for people, like, this is not a failure on your part. This doesn't mean you're
Yes.
defective. That doesn't mean I'm defective. It doesn't mean, it's just like, sometimes we are not a good match for everyone. And just to normalize that, and to be, to help people
Absolutely.
be okay with that. It happens. But yes, having, as a practitioner, I think it's very important to have a kind of a robust referral list for people. Because one thing we know about people is that if they don't have the referral, like, in their hand, chances are they may never seek one out, right? They may leave your office and that might be it, right? So just having
Exactly.
some numbers that you can put in their hands that they can take, because people are more likely to actually make the call when they already have the resources, right? So in a way, that's our doing diligence to people, is making sure they have in their hands somewhere to call or somewhere to go. We never
Absolutely.
want to let a person leave without someone or somewhere, to make contact with.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
that's where I think, that's one of the things that I noticed with you off the bat was your approach is just so ethical, and the practices that you have, ethical practices is something that I've been diving deeply into over the last few years, and it's really bubbling at the forefront with everything that's going on, and within our society, within the spiritual community. I'm just aware and noticing so much, and I'm noticing where I need to call myself in and step it up as well. And so that is truly important, to just have a vast awareness of what truly is an ethical practice within your business. And you named one of them, that like self-awareness is huge, and doing the inner work, whether you're a therapist or whether you're a healer or a reader, whatever you are, yoga teacher, is essential, absolutely
Yeah.
essential, I think, for anyone who is holding space and working with other human beings.
Mhm.
I
Mhm.
think it is
Mhm.
very unethical to not hold space for yourself and not doing that work. And that's where
Mhm.
a lot of people are falling short. A lot of people are bypassing, and so these conversations that can sometimes be very triggering to some. I like how they're bubbling up. I see them on social media with some of the incredible people I follow. And so thank you for
Mhm.
bringing,
Mhm.
I notice you bring that up in your social media, some of the ethical
Yeah.
practices, and even the one um, that you're actually the course. I didn't read all of the details on the course you're launching about
Mhm.
um, racism in the therapy room, and talking about
Oh,
how,
so
yeah,
that was a course so that was a course I was taking.
you were
I'm not launching.
taking.
Well,
Okay,
no, I was taking
you
it.
were
Yeah,
taking it.
I am actually
So interesting.
I am working on a project. Yeah, I am working on a project of putting together a course on
Yeah, and it was so important.
equity. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and so
Yeah, but
ethical of
that's
you.
coming down the pipes.
That's
Yeah, that's coming
exciting.
down the pipes. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I have been ever since you know, yeah, there's so much to unpack with that.
Oh yeah.
Um it's and there's so much to unpack with that. Ethics is one of those things that has been around since
Forever.
it's been an evolving framework, right? But
Yeah.
ethics is such an important component. But ethics is also really it's complicated, right?
Very.
And
Very.
in the words of one of my professors, don't have sex with your clients and everything else depends, right? Like
Yeah,
that's
I
the
love
bottom
that.
line, right?
Yes.
Everything, just don't have sex with your clients, but
Yeah.
everything else is going to depend,
That
right?
was one of the main
And
things
so
my yoga teacher said as well. Like, she
right,
drilled that
right.
home in such a big way
Mm-hmm.
when I took my yoga teacher
Yeah.
training. And we actually
Yeah.
watched some documentaries where some
Mm-hmm.
infamous yoga teachers had
Yes.
some
Yes. Mm-hmm.
scandals, and we
Yeah.
had big discussions. And she said,
Yeah.
the biggest no as a yoga
Mm-hmm.
teacher, please
Mm-hmm.
do not have
Yeah.
sex with your
Yeah.
students
Yeah.
or engage in that activity. And if you're questioning anything else, please come to me. If you need to have that
Mm-hmm.
ethical
Mm-hmm.
discussion, I am here for you, even if
Mm-hmm.
it's 10 years later. And I
Right. Right.
loved that she offered that as well. So I'm like, oh, phew, someone I can actually go back to, and,
Yeah.
and ask if I'm uncertain.
Yeah.
But I'm excited that we're unpacking all of the layers and discussing all of the nuances and complexity of ethics within our practices, and how we hold space for others, because I feel that for so long within our structures, it was causing so much harm because of all the misunderstanding of people not putting it into practical application. Like they
Mhm,
knew
mhm.
ethics in their mind, but they weren't able to act and take action and embody what
Mhm.
ethical behavior truly was. And so now we're really coming to the
Right.
forefront of what
Mhm.
does that look like? Let's have
Right,
these
right.
challenging conversations. So it's really, I'm excited.
Yeah. Yeah, and I've actually been, so I serve on the ethics task force for the International
Mm,
Association for Yoga Therapy for IOIT. And, we've been doing a lot of work in revisiting and revamping our ethical codes. And
wow.
I teach a couple of ethics courses for specifically for advanced yoga teachers in 300-hour programs.
Nice.
And this is like, so you have your commitment to your student, right? And then you
Yeah.
have your client, right? There's that. And then you have your commitment to your colleagues, right? How you're going to show up with peers. And then you have your commitment to the public, right?
Mhm.
And so what I always help people sort of understand is that, you think of it as like four buckets, right? Like there's kind of four categories, like when it comes to ethics. Like, is it a clinical issue, right?
Mhm. Mhm.
Is it a risk management issue, right? Is it a legal issue, right? So legal, risk management, clinical, and I'm like blanking on the fourth one right now. It'll come to me. But yeah, so you've got these different buckets, right? And you have to ask, like, you know, what kind of category does this fall into? Because there isn't going to always be one straight answer or one right answer. And this is why these conversations need to happen in community sometimes, or with
Yeah.
a supervisor or with a trusted colleague. It is not okay. It's not ethical, right? It's not healthy to operate kind of on an island all by yourself, without
Absolutely.
anybody to consult with. Because I think of it sometimes in terms of, if you were going to go get a surgery, like a major surgical procedure done,
Yeah.
wouldn't you want to know that there were a couple of surgeons sort of having a discussion about what the best course of action is going to be, right? So they could come to arrive at a decision like,
Yeah.
this is going to be the best route. This is going to be the best intervention. This is going
Mhm.
to have the most, the highest, best positive outcome, right? Isn't that,
Absolutely.
wouldn't you want that?
Yeah.
So that's why we want to be able to have these conversations in community, um, and not feel like we have to be all by ourselves, kind of floating. And I think it triggers a lot of people's wounds of feeling like they're not good enough, or they're not smart
Yes.
enough, or they're not worthy enough to do this work. But really, it's our ethical duty to make sure that we're taking complex situations that leave us feeling unsettled and uncertain, and we bring them to others to kind of get some more eyes, get other eyes on it. Because
Absolutely.
sometimes when you're in it, you can't always see it when you're in it, right? Versus when you're outside of it, you have a
Yeah.
much different perspective.
Yeah, because sometimes
Yeah,
your emotions are attached in there and past
totally.
experiences, and they just all
Yes.
get weaved in. And absolutely, you need that person, that sounding board to be that mirror and reflect
Mhm.
back to
Mhm.
you,
Mhm.
and have that
Yeah.
other perspective from someone else's
Right.
experiences.
Right. Right. Right.
Mm,
Yeah, no, ethics is a, it's a really, it's an interesting sort of subfield, right, in the field of healthcare, right?
yeah.
So, um, and it's interesting because there's a lot of folks who are doing some amazing work in disrupting some of these spaces and decolonizing these spaces, right? So it's really an interesting intersection of decolonization and ethical practice, right? Because on the one hand, we don't want to get too loose, right?
Yeah.
Because we still want to be safe, right? The ethics keeps us safe. The ethics
Mhm.
keep us boundaried and safe, right? Because the last thing we want, we live in a really litigious society, right? At the end of the day, we want to be safe. We want to make sure that we're following a code and, an expectation. We're sticking with our scope of practice. We're staying in our lane, as I used to be told at where the hospital was like, stay in your lane. Don't get involved in matters that do not involve your scope of practice, because you're liable at the end of the day.
Absolutely.
I have this conversation with, yoga therapists in training all the time. Like, if you want to start talking to your client about stopping their heart medication, you better be sure you have the right training to be able to do that. And most yoga teachers do not. So don't talk to your students about their medications just because you think that medications are evil, right?
Yep.
Don't ever tell somebody to stop taking their medication,
Oh, yeah. That's the perfect example.
Yeah, or if you're going to start talking to clients about their diet, and you better have some training, because then it just becomes very irresponsible, and how many times do we see people kind of posting,
Oh, yeah.
irresponsibly,
Absolutely.
so.
Yeah. Oh, so I
Yep.
was watching the time here, and I know we could
Yeah.
for hours.
On and on.
I'm having so much fun. But
I know, me
we're
too.
reaching the hour mark, and so I normally like to keep it within the hour container.
Yes.
And the final question that we like to kind of close the circle with is, what are the top 3 books you would recommend? Like, I know it's a tough one.
Only 3.
Only
3. Oh, wow. Wow. You asked me a really tough one. The top 3 books.
I know.
Wow.
In the moment, it could change tomorrow. I know.
Wow. The top 3 books.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Let me think here. So there's a couple of books that I come back to over and over and over again. One book, and I'm looking at all of the books that I have over here, and I'm like trying to find, like, what is my favorite version of the Sutras? That's, well, I guess, in terms of, like, I'm just going to speak from the field of, right, like mental health and yoga therapy, because that's what I know.
Yes.
Wow. Okay. Let's see my top 3. So I did recently get a hold of a copy of the Sutras, that is excellent. And it's called Embodying the Yoga Sutras, right? It's a recent publication.
Nice.
It's by 2 students of the Krishnamacharya tradition, which is wonderful, because I think in yoga, when we talk about cultural misappropriation, one thing as yoga practitioners is that it's important to know the lineage, right? I think that is if that's one step in respecting this tradition, is to really know the lineage, right? And so these folks, embodying the Yoga Sutras, it's really clear that they are students of Krishnamacharya. So that's a good one. I'm going to say anything by Bessel van der Kolk. Like, if you want to really understand trauma and how trauma lives in the body, The Body Keeps the Score is a wonderful book. It's readable, it's accessible, it's both a narrative and reference, and for anybody that works with traumatized individuals, anything by him. So Body Keeps the Score is a wonderful book. And I just read an amazing book by Austin Channing Brown, and it is called, hang on, if you give me, it's over there on my bookshelf. If you hang on one second. No, let me just go get it, because it's great.
Yeah, totally worth grabbing it. Oh, yeah.
Here, Black Dignity in a World Made for Whiteness, Austin Channing Brown.
I've been seeing
I
that
just read it.
posted and
Yeah.
advertised, and yeah, I've been seeing pictures of that. So yeah, thank you for sharing.
I read it over the summer, and it's a beautifully written book. She's a beautiful author. You can follow her on Instagram. So I would say those are my top three for today, right?
Yeah, for today.
I am a book hoarder and a bookworm, and my books are like some women like shoes. I like books. So
yeah, I can relate to that.
Some women like makeup, some women like handbags. I like books.
Yep.
So
That's
always have, always will.
Yes, I know when another book comes in the mail, because I often buy them used off a website. And it's funny, it comes in and my husband will get the mail and he's like, another book?
I know. Well, I started ordering them and getting them delivered to my PO box so that my husband wouldn't see them anymore. Like, that's bad. That's grounds for, we need some marriage therapy on that, because I was like, why am I hiding my books from my husband? So
and he's like, have you, especially this year, I've ordered quite a few because I want to unpack stuff and do a bunch of work, and I think I have like 20 on the to read pile and more are tricked. Oh yeah. And he's like, okay, this pile here hasn't been touched. Like, do you think you need to pause? And I'm like, nope.
Yeah, I know. Like, I'll get through them. I mean, my nightstand is a mess. But yeah, books are to me, very worth the cost. So yeah.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for sharing
story, my pleasure,
wisdom, and this incredible conversation. And I'm just so very grateful and honored that you were here to join us. And anyone listening, feel free to follow on Instagram. What is your Instagram handle?
So it's at integrative_mental health.
Yes. And I love what you share on Instagram. So much
thank you.
Insight and support. Thank you. And I love your collages and your quotes. And
thank you.
The love of really that creative energy and love of this is what I'm sharing with the community really shine through. So I really enjoy that. So yeah, definitely
Thanks a lot.
Follow.
Thank you for that.
You're welcome. And then I also encourage all the listeners to join the conversation on Instagram. If there's any questions, I'll be posting once this episode is launched. I'll be posting all of your information and how to find you on Instagram, so everyone can go there and ask questions and continue the conversation, because this conversation is continued within the community.
Yes, it is. Yes,
it truly is. So thank you so much for today.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. It was truly an honor.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for sharing this sacred space within the Soulful Connections podcast. We would love to hear from you. The conversation is co-created, so share your comments below or hop on Instagram and visit soulfulconnectionspodcast_. We are on the other side of the comments and can't wait to connect with you. We appreciate our conversations. Don't forget to give us a follow and leave a review on Apple or Amazon. To support the Soulful Connections podcast, intentional conversations that serve as medicine, share with your friends or on social media.